4th of June. We're privileged tonight to have Council Member Barker lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance, and at his choice, either give us an invocation or a thought or both, whatever you'd like.
We'll start off with the invocation. Our dear Heavenly Father, we're grateful for this day. We're grateful for the weather we're receiving and the sunlight we're getting. We're grateful that we could gather tonight as a city council and citizens of North Ogden, and that we can discuss these items on our agenda. Please bless that we'll be led by thy spirit and that we can make decisions best for North Ogden and for the residents. These things we say in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen. Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We welcome Joyce with us tonight, Joyce Pearson, our Assistant City Recorder, who's filling in for Ryan this evening. Appreciate you coming and joining us. Council, you've had a chance to look at the agenda. Is there anyone that would like to disclose a conflict of interest? Good. Oh, Councilmember Barker.
No, I don't know how much of a conflict of interest, but my family, we own a lot of land in unincorporated North Ogden, or Weber County.
Okay. Well, when we update on that, it'll probably relieve your stress on that one, but thank you for letting us know that. All right. There's none else. We'll move on to item number 2. This is an action to approve the May 14th, 2024 City Council meeting minutes. Do you have a motion to approve those?
So moved.
Thank you, Councilmember Dowpaz. Do we have a second?
Second.
What was that?
Arm wrestle.
He started with I and I just said
I
second.
was gonna, I second it, and then Chris jumped in.
Oh, we'll go with Councilmember Pulver then, if he beat you to the punch. So we have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion or corrections to the minutes? All right, all in favor of approving the May 14th, 2024 City Council meeting minutes, please say aye.
Aye.
Are there any opposed? Motion passes unanimously. John, if you would let us know if anyone's online and would like to comment during our next agenda item, which is public comments. If anyone would like to comment that is here with us this evening, you're welcome to come up to the podium and state your name. If you're a resident of North Ogden, and please limit your comments to no longer than 5 minutes. So if anyone would like to comment, now would be the time. It's a work session. We'll cut you some slack.
You can. When I walked up,
Sign, it says for police training and city civic something.
well, I'm just saying that when I came up, Colonel John said, asked me how come I wasn't parking there, and I could have some.
Those orange things with 2 signs on them.
Oh, I don't know, maybe they since it just.
Mr. Call, could you
I
answer
think
that?
today for the training, I think they're striping the parking lot tomorrow, so they're not trying, it's not officially open until later on this week when the striping's done.
So Brenda, are you looking for a reserved spot or just a regular one?
Oh, with the sign.
My first day was down my road and I had to walk straight from the other part.
Oh, I'm sorry. We'll see what we can do to help you out next time. Okay, all right. Thank you. John, anyone online? I don't see anyone attending online, so I guess we don't have any comments. All right. We'll move on to item number 4, which is a discussion on the annexation of unincorporated islands. Ryan is not here. John, did you have anything to add before I give an update to the council on my discussion with the county?
No, I think that's great to start with the update from
Okay.
the county.
According to Sean Wilkinson, who researched that, he indicated there is no option for a county of the second class to adopt that. According to his research.
Under that bill, yes.
Yes, but there is the previous one, John, that I think you referenced
Mm.
that the county is interested maybe in taking a deeper look at. Do you want to update the council on your understanding of that particular bill?
So that bill from 2017 does not, it's not a requirement for anyone in the county to just automatically annex, but it does allow the legislative bodies, the counties and the cities, to both approve an ordinance that would force all of those properties into an incorporated area. And that's something that the council at the time talked about. Ultimately, I think the county told us at that time they weren't willing to pay for the surveying costs. And we did some quick math and figured that it would take about 25 to 30 years to cover the surveying costs for all the properties that came into the city, and opted to probably not bring, do that expense at the time. And I don't know if that's changed at all. We haven't asked the county if they'd be willing to cover the cost yet.
In my discussion with Sean, he indicated that there's a program that may substantially reduce the costs under that ordinance. So they are taking a look at that.
Oh, good.
So my recommendation would be that the council just wait to see what I should say the city should wait to see what the county decides to do in regards to that, maybe get more information.
Okay.
Because I think a cost analysis did show it was prohibited, but it would require, I think, additional annexations into the city, similar to what House Bill, I think it was 330
Yeah.
talked about. So they're continuing to take a look at it, and we'll just continue to discuss that with the county.
And then if we, just so you know, council, if we did head down that path, it'd be good to know that we might consider either amending the RE20 ordinance, because several of these properties would qualify under that ordinance, or creating a new ordinance that might allow for some accommodations like at the fish farm, to allow for them to continue to operate even if they were in the city, because they'd be grandfathered in, but they wouldn't comply with the ordinances, and that may cause them problems in the future. So.
Okay, that's my update. We'll move on then to item number 5. This discussion will be led by our city manager and attorney, John Call. This will be a discussion of the Northview Senior Center and Recreation. I think primarily looking for the council's philosophy on items of this nature, but I think there are some specifics, John, regarding the senior center that the council may be interested in. So why don't you go ahead?
Okay, thank you, Mayor. So council, we are going to be start off kind of talking about the philosophy around our just our recreation programs in general, which are inexplicably tied to taxes. And this is something that comes up with, we deal with every year. Tax dollars essentially are spent on programs which do not pay for themselves. And the value of those programs is what you get to fight about every budget season. Most people don't realize that 90% of the money that the city spends pretty much comes from taxes of one form or another. So sales tax, motor vehicle tax, property tax, energy, franchise taxes. So there's quite a lot in there. And then if you even start adding in the grants and things we get from the feds or the state, a lot of those are tax dollars as well. And so the conversation really becomes on what's the best way to spend tax dollars. When most people think of tax dollars, are usually thinking of property tax. It seems like what we typically are talking about, because that's the thing the council has the most control over. Every one of those other taxes is basically mandated to us based on some formula at the state level, or based on how many people are spending and buying things in North Ogden, or how many people live in North Ogden. So those all come into play. But so some of these are kind of questions just for the council to think and talk about. Because this is a work session, it's a slightly different format. So I've got several questions here that'd just be good for the council to talk about as we go through them. And so to help just kind of understand the philosophy on how should tax dollars be spent? Should we prioritize? We're just looking for feedback and a conversation among the group on this topic.
John, I'm assuming you mean how should sales tax and other, because property tax is already committed, right, based upon an ordinance that was passed historically by the council.
Yeah, I mean,
So I mean, I just want the council to understand that property tax is already committed to public safety. Although I would point out that there's a little bit of a hiccup in that. Because 3 or 4 years ago, when we decided to not collect the transportation utility fee, I think was the proper title.
mhm.
That money was then moved over to property taxes and it should have been used for roads. But just after that ordinance was passed, got swept into public safety. But my understanding is currently that's the ordinance that's in place is property tax is utilized 100% for public safety.
Correct.
Councilmember Pulver?
So, yeah, this is something we've been wrestling with, and obviously John and I put that thing together and caused me a lot of deep thinking or deep thought. I don't know, whatever you want to call it. But I think the biggest thing when we're talking about spending other people's money is to get the biggest bang for your buck when it goes across the city. You know, obviously, when you're talking about services, you're talking about services for trying to get the most amount of people benefited. That's not the right grammar. An engineer, not an English major. But so, you know, to me, the biggest thing is trying to figure that out. And, you know, we were talking about, I think, trying to rack and stack things, which I'm not quite sure if that's the right way to do it. I know we have programs that are ongoing that, to me, I think benefit a lot of the community. Just picking one out of my brain, you know, being the trunk and treat thing that the city is involved in, and several other things, especially with the aquatic center and other rec programs that we're doing. And if they don't pay for themselves, then, you know, really we need to start, that's where we have to put our collective heads together to say, is that something that benefits a majority of the population? If the answer is yes, then, you know, I think that's something we need to keep in the back of our heads. Senior Center, I think that's one of the biggest things that, you know, especially with the Weaver County initiative that they're doing is something that the city should be involved in. But I guess the question is from tax point of view is how much. And so it really comes down to, you know, what going through and reading through what the county is requiring, you know, that kind of obligates us. So that's what we have to kind of figure out. But to me, I think the biggest the whole part of this is to make sure that we're benefiting the most amount of population of our city. So.
Hey, Chris, would you mind maybe just expanding on your definition of biggest bang for the buck or benefit? What is your definition of that
Well,
when you talk about?
Yeah, the string I'm pulling there is that if everybody's invited, so to speak, you know, I mean, that's kind of the biggest thing. I mean, really, technically, everybody's invited. I was looking through some of the senior center stuff. Technically, everybody's invited. You know, you just, if you're 55, I'm pulling the number out, but under that, then you have to pay more. So, I mean, I get it. And I think that's one of the things that I didn't get before is that technically everybody's invited. So that was one thing that I think kind of tilted my thoughts on that. But other things, you know, a certain age group for baseball, you know, okay, you're limiting it to that group of people and that population, whatever it is. So pretty much, you know, that's, you know, there might be city staff, but for the most part, that group of people should be covering that part of the recreation, you know, and so when it's not, or inflation goes up and fees go up, then that should go up with it. That's kind of my differentiation between senior center where everybody can go and, you know, 3 through, making up a number, 5 through 8 baseball. So if that makes sense.
Yes, Councilmember Barker.
So on this thought that you just had about everyone's invited, sorry, there's an article in KSL Sunday, I think it was. You still can't hear me? That's all right. I don't really say anything anyways. So there was an article on KSL Sunday. Salt Lake City is now paying for every one of their youth to go to their swimming pools for free. You just have to be under 16 and be a Salt Lake City resident, and you can go to any one of their pools. And I think they said there was like, I don't know, in the teens number of pools that they have that these kids can all go to. And it's going to cost them a couple $1 million, but they're taking it out of their industrial taxes, I think. So if we really want the biggest bang for our buck, why not we just open it up and say every one of our residents under 16 can go to the swimming pool for free? Right, it's going to cost something. I agree, but it's just interesting to me that we're trying to figure out how to make everybody pay, and other cities are trying to figure out how to make them more accessible.
But that's because, oh, sorry, but that's because they have the money to use it. I mean, we don't have, unless there's a magic money tree out back, I don't think we have it to spend. I mean, if and that's one of the things that I'm, hoping for next year is that we produce a goal for the city. And if that one of the goals is to have everybody go to the pool that's under 16, then we go find the money and go do it. So, I don't disagree with you, but at the same time, looking through the budget, either you raise taxes or you cut something else to go do that. So anyway.
I think that's an important point. When you look at Ogden City, they're getting all that flow of income from BDO, right? When the government gave them that land, they entered into that agreement with Boyer. So I think that's the point is we have X amount of revenue, right? And the determination of the council is how is that spent to benefit the entire city. I think Councilmember Barker mentioned that comes from their industrial. I mean, if we had the revenue, and it goes back to the old saying, expenses are paid out of revenue. So we pretty much know what our revenue is contingent upon some fluctuations. But I think that's what it boils down to. You literally could do that, but then your options are either you reduce expenditures somewhere else, or the only other option is that you have control over is property taxes, which all goes to public safety, but then requires a lesser use of sales tax to supplement that. So I guess that's the question is, where do you spend your revenues, your limited revenues? Are we prioritize property where they're being spent now? Because I do think the biggest risk the council has in regards to use of revenues out of the general fund is if the aquatic center doesn't break even, and where do we get the money to renovate on a regular basis? We were lucky this time to get money from the RDA, but that's kind of going away. So I do agree. It's simply a question of what priorities and where do we spend our money that we have. Councilmember Severing?
Well, I was just thinking, is that okay? Brenda, can you hear me? I think you can hear me now. And I love what Councilman Chris is thinking. It's just that each one of us probably have a definition of community. So it's kind of hard to say, is each recreational area really meeting everybody in the community their needs? And I don't think we do, but the people who like Little League football or Little League games, we meet their needs. We meet the senior needs. I don't know. So I think that's I understand where you're getting, because we want the best bang for the buck, but I think it's going to be I think it's multi-factor than just one thing.
Oh, Councilmember Watson.
So I feel like, obviously, when you use words like priority, then it comes down to public safety and making sure things are livable here in this community. But I think big picture, we want to see this community come together. We want to see the community be proud of the city that they're from. And I feel like the pool and the recreation and the senior center is kind of highlights of what makes our city great, what makes people proud of their city. And the more we cinch those programs and pull them back and cut services, the less we have to offer to our citizens. And I think that that would be to a detriment, including recreation. And, you know, my parents are retired and they sometimes go to the Weber High School football games just for fun. And they probably pay a $10 or $15 ticket to get in. But if they wanted to, then they would be welcome. Everyone would be welcome and invited as a spectator. They could even participate in coaching in the recreation programs. My dad has coached my kids' programs as the grandpa, and he's loved it. He's shined there, and as a retired member of this area. And so I don't think that recreation programs are limited to certain ages. But if you want to think of it that way, I do think that it's a prevention as well as an investment for our youth to have positive ways to spend their time, recreation in being outside and using their bodies and having something to have hope and a love for and a passion for. Those good things are deposits into who we're shaping our leaders to be for our future and how we want our city to be. If we have kids with nothing to do running around all summer, then, you know, there could be trouble, getting into trouble that, and I'm not saying that, that's a guarantee, but I'm just saying that statistics show that the more beneficial programs kids have, the better off they are. And I think that we can do that service for our future. And it is worth putting money in, even if we're losing money and it doesn't pay for itself. But I also have the perspective that I'd like to propose to everyone that rather than saying the recreation program and the recreation department pay for itself, that instead we say the recreation programs pay for itself. Because if we are putting more money into our programs than what we're getting from our fees, then I think we have a problem. But if we say the recreation department needs to pay for itself, then we're saying that the staff and the salaries of our full-time staff is going to be incorporated and wrapped into that cost. I feel like that is unrealistic, and the fees would have to be, you know, like we said in previous meetings, 125% of what they are now, which isn't realistic. And so I think rather than kind of keep pouring ourselves into this, well, recreation doesn't pay for itself, my proposal is instead we say the recreation's programs pay for themselves and have the staff be something that our city provides. And it's a separate, it's a service that we provide. And so if we can come to this idea that the service from our staff is not in the department, but the programs are paying for it themselves. And maybe we think about it the same way with planning, the planning department or the pool or the senior center. I don't know. I haven't gotten into the nitty gritty details of these numbers, but I just think that our philosophy here could be, rather than have our salary director paid for within the fees of baseball, that we just instead focus on the programs paying for themselves, because I think that's a good, reasonable goal to have. And that's what we've been doing in the past for the past 20 years. And it's been going great. And so that is what I'm suggesting that we, you know, try to move forward on.
Yeah, I think the result is, but let me just ask, let's just get to the point here. I'm going to ask each one of you, starting with you, Councilmember Watson. What is your philosophy on property taxes? What are you willing to do with property taxes? Because that's the answer to, that's the first thing we have to decide here, because that's the revenue that flows in. So what is your position on what should the council do with property taxes?
I mean, didn't we
fund
say
all
that
this.
it's going to public safety?
Well, we're supplementing it. The more we collect in property tax, the less we have to use out of sales tax. Because that's what we're supplementing public safety with, is the money that comes in sales tax. Really, the only control we have of any significance is property tax. So if we're paying, if say 55% of public safety is covered by property tax, 45% is coming out of other sources of revenue, which is primarily sales tax. There's a few grants and things of that nature. But I think the council, we need to understand, because I mean, we can say it's, and I don't have any problem with your approach there. We can say whatever we want, but the fact is we still have to use funds to make up the difference. So I'm interested to know what each council member's philosophy is on property tax, because we can do a lot of things if the council wants to, but it all pretty much hinges on that philosophy. Councilmember Watson?
I mean, as it was last year, all of public safety, all of property tax went to public safety, and it was subsidized or additional came from sales tax, and that seems to be a great idea. I'm not trying to change that, but
No.
I just don't want to eliminate our services. So
And I understand that. My question is, how much are you willing to raise property taxes to cover I don't know, I hate to use this term because I agree that recreation and taking care of our seniors is very important in our community. I just want to know how much the council is willing to increase property tax to do that.
it seems like we have a plan, don't we?
Well, the plan is you have to raise property taxes to cover these things.
So I think, let me just phrase it maybe a different way. I think that, back to my comment about 90% of the city operates on some sort of tax. Property tax goes to police, and then everything else is supplemented by some other form, with the exception of 4 departments. And Chris is involved with 3 of them: water, sewer, storm. And then the rest are all property tax or sales tax subsidized, except for building. The building department is the only other department in the city that pays for itself. Everybody else is coming out of property tax. And it might even go to, I've got a few questions that kind of are all here together, but this is, I think, what the mayor is getting at, is if a certain program, whatever you're thinking about, senior center, planning, whatever, was in danger of elimination, would you raise property taxes to pay for it? Or if you eliminated a program and there was extra money, what would you save it? Would you save it or would you spend it? So those are the kind of 3 questions of this, and that's how we prioritize everything, right? If it came down to it, we only had enough money to cover the police station and the police operations, I think that most of the council would agree, and it'd probably be my recommendation, that we keep officers in cars and on the streets, because safety is going to be more important than keeping pool open. However, there's extra money, and so now you have to prioritize it. And at what point do you turn the valve open a little more to get property tax, which then puts more property tax in police, which then allows more sales tax that was going to police to go out into the other programs. So and I think that's what the mayor's looking for, is for every council member to say, hey, I feel like, let's just use senior center as a good example. I mean, Zell is here. I warned her we were having this discussion, and I said, hey, for the senior center, I would raise property taxes. I might not raise $500,000, but if we need $50,000, we should raise $50,000. So I think that's kind of the goal he's after, just to get, because when we met, Christina, you and me and the mayor, we said we need the council to take a position so that we as staff know how to make recommendations on the budget. Sorry, that's my spiel.
Councilmember Pulver, then we'll go to Councilmember.
And it's a
Douglas.
quick one. So there's an ordinance that states that we have to use property taxes on the public safety. And that's sacrosanct. We can't look at that, or it's just something that, because to me, and I'm being very generic, besides some certain enterprise funds, everything goes into a bucket. And then that money comes out and goes to a myriad of different things. So I guess, from my point of view, does it really matter? And I guess, so that to me, I'm kind of like when people say, oh, it has to go into public safety. I'm like, what doesn't even cover a majority of it? Well, there was it 55%? Anyway, so I don't know why we keep pushing that. Obviously, public safety is important. We're going to cover that no matter what. So, I mean, to me, let's just put that aside and say, now, if you're, like you're saying, if you're talking about some program that you want to save, then you have to raise taxes. That's, to me, it's a 1 or a 0. It's pretty simple. But anyway, sorry.
Can I give you just a little background before we go to Councilmember Dalpaz? Just my take on perhaps why that ordinance came into play. In the several years ago, when we had to substantially increase property taxes to cover some commitments and catch up with some things that came to the surface, there were a lot of citizens that were unhappy with that. And I think it made the sale a little easier, that it was for public safety, it'd be used for public safety. And citizens, because they all understand that's number one priority, right? But you're right, everything goes into a big bucket and you can divide it up however you want. But the only spigot that really goes into the bucket to increase kind of the things we're talking about, it's like the gentleman that recently suggested we do a recreation center, right? John got really excited about that because he likes recreation centers. But there's only one way to build that, right? You either bond for it and then you have to pay for the bond with taxes. But I believe that's kind of was part of the motivation for, and correct me, John, you were here, I believe, but it kind of made it easier to say, well, all property taxes go to public safety.
In fact, there's been conversations about just, instead of calling it North Ogden property tax, calling it a special revenue fund, and it's just for public safety. And then on the tax things, it would show North Ogden Public Safety as the taxing entity. But it's just optics, right? The mayor's point and Chris's point is exactly right. It all goes into the bucket. It's like you're filling the bathtub and the only valve you can play with is the cold valve because you're getting this much hot water no matter what. So it's just
Let's go to Councilmember Dalpaz. I just think that's important that we kind of understand what we're willing to do to balance these things out, because I think we all have differences of opinion, right? What is community or what benefits? And before we ever get into that discussion, we have to know, what percent of our budget are we willing to spend on, and I almost hate to use this term because everything's essential in creating a community, but non-essential, programs. And I do believe, you've heard me say many times, we want to be a community, not just a city. There's a substantial difference. But anyway, go ahead, Councilmember Dalpaz.
Thank you. Yeah, I think that to John's point, there are some departments in the city that are zero funded by anything other than general funds. Like a good example would be our Parks Department. They're out mowing lawns for the summer, and there isn't a specific revenue that it comes in from, to a small degree, soccer field rentals, things like that, but it's not a lot of money. Pavilion rentals, but I don't think that amount of money is even close to sufficient to cover all of the equipment and the people to do that. So the way that my mind thinks is we've got the aquatic center that is bringing in money. But it's also taking a lot to keep it going, but it's actually bringing in money versus a lawn mowing crew that is unable to bring in money. It's just the way that it is. And then the little league that we run is also bringing in money, but is, so what I'm trying to say is they're bringing in more money than some departments are able, and it's just a little challenging because I feel like the departments that have a really easy thing to track them by, such as like building permits, that's a good example. You can run into this, oh, well, we don't have enough building permits, so we're going to have to slash a staff or something like that, which luckily we haven't had to do anything like that recently. So I guess what I'm trying to say is I'm comfortable funding Little League. I'm comfortable funding the aquatic center to a degree. And there's a lot of unknowns. I think we're going to earn more revenues this year at the aquatic center to be discovered. We don't know exactly what that amount will be. And I think it's incredibly difficult to put a pin on that number, but yeah, I think it's to the benefit of the city as a whole to be able to fund these things. Case in point would be Little League. You put kids to doing something productive and keeps them busy, and they're not out messing around, and it's contributing to their positive mental health. So that's kind of the way that my mind's thinking.
And I may have missed it, but I'm not sure anybody's talked about cutting out recreation. But let me just kind of put this in perspective. If this council was unwilling to increase property taxes this year, we would not have a balanced budget. Is that correct, John?
Correct. Yeah.
And that's just doing what we're doing now. And so next week, the council will be faced with the decision of what they're going to do with property taxes just to maintain where we're at today. So I'm back to my question. I believe, if I'm reading the council right, they understand there's things that are important to our youth, to our senior citizens, to, the middle group. I don't think I've heard anyone say we want to cut out and just be frugal. I do think you have to prioritize how you're going to spend your money. That's just how kind of budgeting works, right? But just to put it in perspective, if the council was not willing to address an increase in property taxes, they would be faced with, okay, your other option is what? Reduce services or some of these things you're talking about. So I'm just back to the fact of, yes, the council is willing to invest money in its community. To what level and how are we going to pay for that? Because our community is growing. I don't think we're extravagant in any of our, what I would call community events. I think we're pretty frugal. So I'm just kind of back to finding out what the position is of the council. Maybe John, you could put those questions back up there and we could answer them one at a time.
Let's see. Okay. So they're all three kind of together. If you eliminate a program, what would you spend it on? Or what would you save it for? Or if something was
John,
eliminated.
can we just do one question at a time?
Yeah, I just want to make it clear that they're all three together. And
Because
so-
I'm just thinking the council wouldn't just cut programs to save money. They would only do that out of necessity. So would you spend that money on or save it? I mean, I believe the council would only cut programs if it became absolutely necessary, right? So it would be probably not saving any money. It would just be providing for the survival of, but your point could be, okay, so what would survive and what wouldn't?
And that, I think that's probably the right question, is that they're kind of designed to almost help the council prioritize, okay, what's number one, and all the way down through 100 various line items. I mean, there's more than that in reality, but how do you figure out if sales tax goes in the tank next year? In 2008, we lost 15% of our sales tax. And in that situation, I mean, that's $800,000. So what would be the stuff that we would cut back on? And that's kind of the question. Or if you knew that was coming, the hard part is we don't know that's coming. Would you raise property taxes $800,000 to cover it? And so it's kind of a philosophical question for the council of, what are your positions? And Councilmember Watson has been very vocal about her support for rec and things like that. It is something that we all know she's passionate about. And as I told her, when me and her and the mayor were talking about it, I said, we need all 5 council members to not necessarily be passionate about rec, but to say, hey, here's my line, here's where I think I am, because that helps us in policy. And this is not just for this budget season, but this is moving forward as we have budget discussions just in general. It'll really help guide us in making presentations on how do we go that. And then as we go to the last part of this conversation with the senior center, I'll ruin the surprise for you. My anticipation is sometime in the next 10 years, the money that is being offered to us is going to get lower. I mean, I know it'll get lower and lower, but it might dry up completely. And if it dries up completely, then do we step up and take it on entirely?
As an example, the county says they will not raise property taxes to create any more money for senior citizens. They feel like that percentage of their budget is pretty substantial by the time they do meals and transportation and run the centers. And they've made it very clear they're not willing to do that because they were requested to do that. And I'm not being negative by any means. That's their call, but they've made the decision that that's how much they are willing to spend on senior citizens. And so they've made a tough decision that they're going to consolidate down to probably 3 regional senior centers. Strongly considering North Ogden is one of them if the council wants to do that. But I think John's probably right. John, you're leading this discussion. So what would you like?
So who else has a strong direction that and it, like I said, there's 5 of you, so that 3 of you can go one way and 2 can go the other, and we still have decisions, right?
So I'm not shy to say it. I mean, the last couple of years have been really rough with our property tax increases out of what I feel is necessity based on the needs of the city. An example is, I think it was 2 years ago that we had a 23-ish% tax increase on property taxes. And I think that goes to show how willing I am to increase taxes to maintain a service, because the way that my mind thinks on that is we didn't consider eliminating the recreation program that year. We could have considered eliminating the recreation program that year, and our tax increase might have been 15% instead of 24% on that particular year. That's just throwing a number out of the air. So I think that at least for the people that have been on the council for a little while, that gives a little bit of an indicator as to how willing we are to increase taxes as needed for these type of programs. It doesn't mean that it brings me great joy, but I think it's an indicator. Even though it is all technically going to public safety, it's still, to Councilman Pulver's point, it's all part of a bucket and all feeds the different programs.
And John is, he may be prophetically correct. He's estimated what the base salary of a public safety individual be within 10 years. I just had a conversation, I think I mentioned this to Ryan. What one of the cities very close to us is doing with their public safety individuals, which may cause us, as we talk next week, to have an adjustment there, because we've all indicated the necessity to maintain public safety. But I think we'll see that public safety is #1 priority. Will also take additional investment. So, okay, if I hear that correct, Councilmember Delpaz, you're willing to do basically whatever it takes to maintain at least our current standard of community living.
I think whatever it takes is maybe a little extreme, but I'm saying that in the last 2 years, you've seen what I was willing to accept in increases, because we didn't get rid of the program on those years.
Yeah,
You
and
know?
the reason we did that is because we want to maintain. If you recall, that started out at like 42%, I think.
Yeah.
There, but yeah, that 23% was done just to do what it took to maintain our current standard. And I think that's kind of where we have been in our budgeting processes, maintaining. So if we want to jump up from maintaining to enhance, but let's go with you, Councilmember Pulver. You weren't here during that particular time.
So, yeah, and I guess to me, I think as a former public person, I mean, still pay taxes, but the main point that I think last year that kind of just rubbed me the wrong way is that it seemed, this is all perception, perspective, that the city picked a number. It wasn't tied to a certain event, like to save the rec program, you need $100,000 and this is how we're going to do it, and blah, blah, blah. To me, that would have helped a lot. And I think, to me, from what we saw, it was, it went into, doing this, and that. But to me, if we have a goal or something that, hey, all the city can get behind, and I'm making up stuff, but every single sidewalk that we have doesn't have any issues on it. To me, that would be a pretty solid goal, because then we, number one, don't have to pay more insurance, which is a ginormous chunk, but something like that you can get behind, that, hey, people walk on those sidewalks, et cetera, and we don't have to get behind it per se, but, and it's tangible, because you can go out and figure out that, hey, this is cracked, we got to go fix it. Something like that. If there was, we decided next year to do some type of tax increase, that's what, to me, it's easier to get behind that than just raising it by 20%. And you're like, well, what was that for? You can explain it in the truth and taxation, but there's a lot of people that had no clue. And having go through the city citizens budget committee twice, and Brenda can vouch for me on this, you learn just so much behind that the city is running on what I would call shoestring. There's not much more that if you get nailed with a 800 grand sales tax decrease, you are chopping stuff, or you're raising taxes to cover it. There is no, well, we can tweak this here and tweak that there, like for this year, we kind of raised sales tax and kind of did some magic to get to where we're at. But, it's a little bit, anyway, so long story short, I think the biggest thing right now is that if we have a philosophy of, if the city is heavily involved in an event, meaning they're funding it almost exclusively, it should be for the as broad as you can, group of people. And if we are staffing it, meaning the rec program, within the individuals that are doing certain things should pay whatever they need to cover the costs, not the staff costs, but the costs to have the equipment or whatever they need to do, and then the next thing is, hey, if they're using this building for something, then, that's even the next step down. But to me, that's why we came up with that protocol, is that so the staff knows, hey, if we're managing an event, it should be to a broad scope, not to 15 people that, I don't know, I'm making up something, but it should be for the broader community. If anybody can go, then the city should be all in. So if not, then somebody should be paying for it, or we're sponsored or heavily sponsored, or we're just providing a building for a little bit cheaper. Anyway, sorry.
Let me
Long-
make a correction.
Correction.
My correction,
Oh.
not your correction. In maintaining. You brought up the sidewalk issue. Our best estimate on that, and I almost don't want to throw it out to shock people, we think there's a $500,000 liability sitting out there just to get sidewalks in shape.
It's probably higher.
And our roads are much higher than that. Because there has not been money invested in maintaining our roads for probably the last 20 years, to be honest, not being critical of anybody, but there has not been an emphasis on maintaining our roads. So now you see the condition of our roads. I would say too, we must not be very good communicators, because, and if Jamie were here, she could correct me, but John knows enough about this, he can correct me. I've always said that 80% of the budget increases we have incurred are related to basically salaries and wages of our staff. Primarily public safety, because of the demand for officers and trying to be competitive. So we had to catch up to be competitive. And then it just kept growing, right? We went through a time of the highest inflation we've had in 40 years. But I think we've tried to explain that basically 80% of any property tax increase has been to maintain our policy on salaries and to invest properly in public safety. So somehow we've got to increase that because it's just like we didn't know why we just probably didn't communicate it very well then. Because that's, if you go back and historically look at that, is it about 80%, John? Is that about the right number?
Yeah, it is.
It used to be for a number of years. How long did the city employees go without any raise, John?
For 3 years, 2008 to 2011, there basically wasn't an increase.
And then what was it, like 2%?
3% most years until 2019, maybe 2018.
Because the employment market was entirely different. You could kind of do that and stay status quo. So maybe one of the things we need to do is better communicate, because I don't think the council has ever just kind of done it without a purpose, but obviously we can increase communication there. But those are two things that are sitting out there that need to be addressed. Is our sidewalk issue, like you brought up, Chris, that's probably a pretty high priority, right? Because that's essential use of funds. And then, our road situation. Those two things probably need to be addressed. Councilmember Severing, we haven't heard from you. What would you like to add to the conversation regarding John's questions up there that we're answering kind of one at a time?
Did you want us to each address those one at a time?
I think it's important to know where we're at. Yeah.
Okay, put up question number 1 for me, John.
So this is number 1.
So do you want me then to, I guess maybe that's kind of obvious. You want me to say a program I would eliminate and where I would put that money?
I don't think you have to name a specific program. It's just, are you willing to eliminate programs?
I can think of a couple.
Oh, okay.
So I don't think these are huge expenditures for the city. But when Chris made the comment about, the greatest benefit, these are just ideas that just came to my mind. I mean, the trunk or treat, for example, trunk or treat, probably every LDS church in the city does a trunk or treat. Most neighborhoods get together and do trunk or treats. Is it a necessity for us to do a trunk or treat? Probably not a necessity. I would take that money. I would probably say, man, am I going to sound heretic now? I would probably say that the Christmas, as meaningful as Christmas is to me, I'm not sure if it's an absolute necessity. But to me, one thing I would say is a necessity is the Little League recreational programs. So if I were to shift the money based on question number 1, I would make sure that we were complementing, maybe supplementing where families can't. Do I get question number 2? I guess I kind of answered that one then, right?
Yeah.
I guess I will go back to 2 and say, you know what? I think it is, if the citizens really understood how much money it's going to take to repair sidewalks and to repair the roads. I would say that outside of recreation, then the money would go toward roads and sidewalks. So question number 3, if in danger of elimination, would you raise taxes? I think I just want to make it very, very clear to the public that when we raise taxes 23%, to previous city council's credit, there's not one of us who wants to raise property taxes, right? I don't think any one of us want to, but to their credit, they didn't. The negative side of that is it got us so far behind that we were just kicking, as we've said before, the proverbial can down the road. So at 23%, actually kind of got us back to where we kind of were in a better position. For me, I think I've always believed in my own personal budget. I believe the same thing for the city, that I would want to have a gentle rate increase every year, because I believe in staying as best we can ahead of the curve.
Is that the last question, John?
Yep.
Thank you. Okay, Councilmember Barker, let's hear from you.
Make sure I get real close to this. I think I'm actually a lot along the lines of Councilman Severing. Honestly, if we had to eliminate anything, it would be those free public events. And it's only because of, this is my own perception. I'm not going to take my kids to go stand in that trunk or treat line. I'll go to the store and buy them a bag of candy. And working at the trunk or treat, majority of the residents are not North Ogden residents that are there. They're from Ogden, they're from Harrisville, they're from neighboring. We've seen them as far away as Roy, Riverdale. People come out when there's free candy. And that's why I'm in that opinion that it's just not worth it. But I do know people like it. But how many man hours or city staff hours are we actually contributing? It's not just contributing candy. We've got the police departments there with their vehicle, city staff has vehicles. It's a big contribution. And I feel the same way about other city events that I don't like to show up in crowds, so I don't show up in crowds. I agree that we should maybe take that money and supplement direct. I don't agree that we should raise recreation prices just because we want to try to break even. I've said this before, if we raise our prices and Pleasant View doesn't, North Ogden residents are going to go to Pleasant View. When I had my oldest son that's no longer in rec, there was a time we were playing in Pleasant View because it was cheaper. And there was a North Ogden City Park and Rec employee that lived in North Ogden that was playing in Pleasant View because it was cheaper. I've heard other stories when kids my age, when they were kids, this was a while ago, Riverdale used to have free recreation because of their sales tax. Roy didn't, but they all played together. All the Roy kids were using a Riverdale address to get in for free. Parents are going to go where it's most beneficial. So if we raise our rates, are we actually doing us a disservice? Because now we're going to lose participants. They're going to go to the neighboring city. And is that going to cause a bigger hole? Because now we're not collecting what we were originally collecting. Councilman Pulver actually made a good point that said it all comes down to yes or no. Are we going to supplement this or not? If we're not, then at the end of the pool season, let's close down the pool, bulldoze it down, put in townhomes or whatever, and move on. That's the only way we'll be profitable. And we can do that with every one of our parks too. If we're not going to supplement them, then let's just tear them up and put in townhomes and apartments, and then we'll be profitable. Do we want to be that council?
I mean, to be honest, that seems, I mean, obviously that's a bit extreme, because I'm not saying supplement, get rid of the rec programs. They have to be fully funded. But when year to year, we're not covering inflation, sure, let Pleasant View do whatever they want. But it's to Brenda and Sandy, is it my fiduciary duty to make sure that they're paying the right amount of taxes for services that they require? If the rec fees are increasing inside the city and we're supplementing them, is that how all the people, I don't feel comfortable doing that and providing, sure, public parks, great. That's kind of obvious, but when you're talking about other things that are not directly applicable to every citizen, they should be covered. And I'm not saying recreation, they're awesome. I did them all my life. I did it for my kids until they they couldn't do them anymore. So my point is that if we're not covering our costs, then the citizens are. And so that's my problem with programs that aren't funded exclusively by the people that are doing it. You know, okay, so we might lose people, then great. You know, I mean, we're not funding, the whole point of each rec program is not to make sure that we get the maximum amount of people. I mean, the point is that it's not something that we can cover 100%, or we should be covering 100%, because if not, then we're supplementing it. And do we tell someone that we're not going to fix the sidewalk because we want to help somebody else make sure that we maintain our fees forever at $60 or $55, whatever it is for the rest of our lives? The whole point is it's not going to stay that way. It shouldn't stay that way, inflation wise. So we just have to have that mentality that we can't, well, if they don't do it, then we don't do it. Totally different thing. I mean, you look at the Pleasant View budget, they are doing a lot of different things that are helping them with commercial. We're not right now. I mean, the best thing that are hoping on, crossing our fingers on, is the development south of Lee's. That's it. That's all we're doing to help ourselves. Nothing else. That's what's scaring me right now. So anyway, sorry, got off on a tangent.
So what other ideas do you have, Chris,
Wanna
to do that? I mean, if you're saying alls we're doing,
No.
is that what else? What are your other ideas?
What else is there? Well, you said it yourself, is that when we're talking about revenue, you either raise taxes or cut property taxes, or you get more commercial to have more sales tax. That's pretty much it. So if
So how do you propose we get more commercial? That's my question.
Well, that's what I'm saying, is that either there's a committee or something, and there was an economic development. Anyways, that's a longer topic, but my point is that if we're not raising things to cover inflation, you know, obviously the senior center charges people for dinner. Now it's obviously based on your age, et cetera, but it hasn't been $5 forever. It's slowly increased, I'm sure. I mean, Zella can tell me that, but every fee hasn't stayed the same since, you know, we've incorporated. Everything goes up due to inflation or something that tells us we need to raise it. So, you know, I guess my only put is that if we're not in line with that philosophy, then we're kind of, you know, we should be allowing people to increase our fees, the city, to cover our costs. So we're not putting it on the citizen of the taxpayer when we have to raise taxes because we're subsidizing some other program.
So would it be fair to say that you're proposing that we have a policy that fees are adjusted annually based upon a selected inflationary factor? Is that something you're
It should be
proposing?
reviewed. Whether it's raised or not is up to the council, obviously. Yeah. So
I
mean, if
think we
it's-
review fees every year, don't we, John?
We do. We don't formally go through every single one, but it's a constant conversation. We typically update the fee schedule 2 or 3 times a year based on new information that comes in. So in 2 weeks, we will bring the fee schedule where we will be talking about impact fees for public safety and parks, as well as rec fees and some others that we've said, hey, it's time. It's time to.
Because I think it was 2019 or something around there, or maybe 21. It was an odd number that the rec fees had gone up. So, and that's all I'm asking, is that if it's being reviewed, great, you know, but I know this much about some of these programs, so.
Councilmember Dalpaz, I think you had your hand up. Did you want to comment?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think that Pleasant View is doing anything special to get the business that they're getting. I think that they had old farmland that the only thing special that they did is they rezoned it for commercial, which is completely a natural idea along that corridor. It's just total luck of the draw. I kind of take issue with thinking that there's some special sauce that they have right now. And the corner of 2700 in Washington right now, it's coming. You know, there's going to be some businesses that are coming. It's going to take some patience. There are some natural strategic advantages that a Pleasant View and a Far West would have over us. They're located closer to the freeway. Pleasant View in particular is located closer to a higher median income Pleasant View's median income is much higher than North Ogden's. And so there are things that are naturally driving things in that direction, I think. But I just kind of took a little bit of issue that it seems like we're not trying to do things when I think we're very supportive of trying to get businesses in North Ogden.
And the option would be, I mean, if the council wants to employ I talked to John about this and maybe I misinterpreted his answer, but you know, the council can set aside money to hire an economic development director. I think we did that once before, didn't we, John?
Yeah, Dave Carlson was the economic development director. And then essentially Mayor Taylor took it on and went to a zillion shows and was trying to recruit. And anyways, Smith's happened because Smith's wanted to move their store. It wasn't because of anything special we did, but.
Yeah. But we can always do that if the council so desires to concentrate on that. I believe what motivated the development in Pleasant View is E.K. Bailey owned a lot of that ground or got involved in that. So it's developers seeking out opportunities, and I think we've got a good opportunity, but it's contingent upon a few things that we don't have control over, which primarily is moving that basin out of the way. But you know, Ryan kind of scooted off. He didn't answer some of those questions, John. I want him to have an opportunity.
Okay.
Just so we can kind of get a thermometer reading of where we're at.
I answered that one.
Yeah.
Yep. I think we should raise taxes if it's to keep everything as it is today. Good. And recreation fees, actually, what the youth pay for, it does pay for their whole jerseys, equipment, everything. The only thing we're not covering is salaries. Is some of the department salaries. So are we going to help pay for salaries? That's the question. And if that, yeah. So that's why I think we should raise, yes, because we got to help pay for salaries.
Okay. Let's see, who else? Did you have your hand up, Councilmember Watson? Did you want to make a further comment?
I was just going to refer back to a previous meeting when I reported that I spoke with our recreation director, Becca Godfrey, who said that she is constantly reviewing her recreation fees against all the cities that are within the Wasatch Front, especially cities that are similar sales revenue cities to us, to make sure that our recreation fees stay competitive to those neighboring cities.
Okay, so not to belabor this, could I just summarize what I heard, and you can correct me, is that the council is very prudent in spending taxpayer money, that we ought to consistently look at opportunities to make sure that we're being competitive, but being aware of inflation and making the necessary adjustments in the pay-per-play arena, I would say. The council is willing to raise property taxes in a reasonable, I guess is the term I would use, a reasonable amount to maintain at least the current standard of living in our community. The question that ultimately has to be answered is maintaining the current status does not cover things like maintaining our sidewalks and our roads. But at a minimum, that's what I heard, is that the council is willing, after prudently looking at all expenses, to maintain our current standard of living in our community, raise taxes somewhere in the single digits on a, I think Councilman Severing even said, on a regular basis, maybe in conjunction with inflation, just so we don't get ourselves in a position where some future council has to pull the trigger on a 20% increase. Is that summary about right? Councilmember Dalpaz?
I think that sounds about right, just to try to summarize it the best you can. I like this discussion. I think it's very, very healthy. It's very good for us to have this discussion. I guarantee this discussion did not happen 9 years ago in the same way. Because I don't believe that the elected officials at that time would have wanted to have that pressure on them. So thank you, Mayor, for having this tough discussion. That's not fun to have, but I think is very healthy for us to have.
Thank you. And I just want to reiterate, I think it's healthy. Not everyone has to agree. But I think it's really important that each of you, your council members, vote on factual information. Have you done your research? And you may reach a different conclusion than someone else. That's okay. I think, if we consistently had 5-0 votes, I'd be concerned. Because each one of you are entitled and have been elected to represent, constituents in our city. So I appreciate your willingness to have open discussion and state where you are. You can see that there's a little bit of variance where they are, but as John said, majority rules, right? So it only takes 3 votes. And when we come to those things, which will probably be next week, there'll be some discussion on where we're at with some adjustments in the budget with further things we found out. And to what degree, do we fund those things? I would ask that you continue to think about not only maintaining where we're at, but how do we enhance the essentials, I guess, that we're facing with. Because I know each one of you want to do what's best for the city, but I would always encourage you to, I can't remember who it was, somebody that was campaigning said as they talk to senior citizens, their greatest fear is they'd be priced out of their homes. That many of them are paying more property taxes today than they ever paid in a mortgage payment. So I know each one of you are cognizant of that. Finding that balance, I think, is really important. And I think, Chris has always talked about enhancing our communication. I'm all for that because I still believe there's a number of citizens who believe that $4,000 tax bill all comes to North Ogden. And so, we've got to communicate much better than we historically have, and we're surely open for ideas. But literally, I think about 10% would be the average of somebody's property tax bill that would come to the city, which covers plowing the roads, funding public safety. But the bottom line is everything comes out of their pocket, no matter where they're paying it. So thank you for that discussion. John, does that help you with your questions there? Does that give you some thought?
I think so. And let me summarize where I think this goes for Zella's benefit is I think the council would be supportive of us putting together a proposal for the Weber Human Services to consider for us to take over the stuff there. And we don't know exactly what that means. Like, I can't say today, well, that means we're going to paint it red and do this and that. It just means that we're interested in sharing that load in that way as they're winding down their support, for lack of a better word. And support, that's wrong, because they're still supportive. It's just they want to not be the front seat driver of it. They're not the captain anymore.
But John, I think it's important for the council to know what that means. I'm not sure the council really understands, and I call it an investment because I do believe it's an investment in taking care of our senior citizens who've contributed so much to our community. But I do think they should have a general idea of what that means, even though it's not solidified at this point in time. What that means for us to make a proposal to be one of the 3 regional senior centers. I think we've kind of gone through approximately what that takes based upon the latest information we have from the county. And we are reaching out to other mayors who would be participating in the regional concept, asking them to participate similar to what Pleasant View is doing. But John, maybe, you could give because they have a general idea, for instance, what it is with recreation, they have a general idea what it could be with the aquatic center, those things. So I think you have some information on that. Am I correct?
Yeah, so generally, the city would move more towards the black, meaning the senior center would get more funding than it has historically. But there would be an increase in the burden in that we would be the hiring agency for an employee and a part-time employee. That's what's there right now is one full-timer, one part-timer. We would take on that role, and as things increase in cost, inflation would take over. And I don't believe there's an expectation that the amount of money we will be getting from Weber Human Services will increase. One of their complaints is that the money that they're getting from the feds for their senior programs is not going up. It's pretty stagnant, and the increases are few and far between. So I think the first year we figured that we would still be in the hole. I feel like it was $18,000, but then the year after we thought we might actually break even just because there'd be some transitional costs. Christina has it. She's pulling it up because
Yeah, we went
Yeah.
through this. But John, I think you have to include the operating costs of the building. The sinking fund to maintain. But why don't you go through those numbers there, just so the council has an idea?
so right now it costs us about $61,000 a year for our support for keeping the senior center open. That doesn't include the capital investment in equipment and things like that. That's operations and maintenance, toilet paper, lights, sound, stuff like that. The next or this year that we're coming up upon, our costs have actually gone up by $12,000 because the cleaning contract went up, and utilities, some utilities have doubled. So the rate we paid has gone up. So it'd go up to a negative $72,000. And then if we get the funding from the county and we bring in a full-timer, hired, we'll offer it out and have people apply and select someone. There's a chance that we could go in the positive direction, $36,000. So there'd be about $100,000 swing, but that essentially what we're really thinking is it's going to be about a break even, because that 36 would be considering some other things that haven't been decided yet. And I guess what I mean by that is there a chance to consolidate other positions in the city into that role or into the supporting role, the part-time, and find a way to make it so that it's more efficient for everybody?
But John, status quo, just my memory, correct me if I'm wrong. It's about 60-something thousand dollars just to operate electricity, cleaning, etc.
Yep.
On top of that, we're sending to the county $32,000.
Correct.
So right there, that's $96,000. Basically, take away a little bit for maybe Pleasant View, but I'm thinking right now, if everything stayed the same, if the county just doesn't do anything different, it's about $100,000 a year. Would that be correct? 32 plus 60 something, and that doesn't even cover a sinking fund to make repairs.
Yeah, and the only offsetting cost is we do rent it for about $3,000 or $4,000 a year, and then we've got the $12,000 from Pleasant View.
But here's the other thing, and I think Councilmember Watson, we have a unique situation. They really like our model. The county really likes our model with contributions from other cities. But also the board there has about $70,000. They would probably be asked to use some of that money on an ongoing basis to cover some of the programs that take place there. It's kind of a reverse pay to play, so to speak, because I think they've got that money from contributions over time. Those who are able to have been making contributions, that money should probably be used to enhance programs and offset some of the cost to the city. You literally can't require under the county's proposal, you can't require people to pay money. But I think many of our senior citizens have been generous. But that ought to probably be considered, is that money ought to be used to enhance programs and offset some of the city's costs. So maybe you could just think about that.
And that's a really good point, Mayor, that I failed to mention is there's really three partnerships. There's us in the county, or us and Weaver Human Services, Weaver Human Services with the Northview Seniors, and us with the Northview Seniors. So there's three entities that are involved in that facility. And as we move forward, if the county accepts our proposal, we'll be involving everyone in the discussion so that we're not just doing something that's only good for the city. We're going to make sure that everyone's on board, all the stakeholders.
And we are hoping that the other cities that would utilize that facility would step up to the plate. It's much cheaper than them spending a couple $1 million and getting no funding from the county, because the county is pretty set on going with regional facilities. Councilmember Watson?
So just to bring this up so we're all on the same page, assuming that we would like to have the senior center program hosted and paid for from the city when the county doesn't want to be the captain anymore, we write that letter and ask for that to happen right away, and then we hear back pretty soon. And when does this, what's the next step forward is, I guess what I'm asking.
So they would let us know October, November. There's been some discussion about them potentially pushing the dates back a little bit, but then they would for sure want to be turning it over to us on July 1st of 2025. That would be the latest that they've indicated that they would want to just turn it over.
And when would we be able to discuss this with the Northview Seniors Center?
I think as soon as the county makes a final determination, I believe they have a board meeting next week. But in WACOG last night, one of the commissioners was talking about they're reconsidering now maybe 4 regional centers, which would cut back the funding that each city would receive. They're going to fund 4 this year at I think 59,000. They were going to go to 3 and increase that funding to 76. But now they're considering, they're having a hard time making a decision. Just let me put it that way. So it's hard for us. And I mentioned last night that that's why we need additional time, right? We need to know the facts so that we can make a proposal that's provides a good program for the seniors, but makes the investment of the city manageable. And we just don't know what that is because they keep kind of going back and forth. So,
Well, I'm happy to help as the liaison for the senior center on whatever I can communicate when that time comes.
okay. What else, John? Will it be helpful to you in answering your questions? Did you get answers to your questions?
I think so. And I think that we've got, basically like you summarized, Mayor, that consensus of kind of maintaining what we have with maybe some questions about events, some specific events. Then I think, like, for example, on those events, we'll talk to those who are involved in organizing and saying, hey, if these aren't paying for themselves, then they might go away.
You know, I think Pleasant View has a pretty good model, and North Ogden used to have it. I remember the old pumpkin patch. Do you remember that? Or you went through Oak Lawn Park and they had all the pumpkins lit, and that was totally put on by citizens. And a lot of Pleasant View stuff is handled and done by citizens. So I think, the citizens should have a chance to weigh in on what they're willing to do to, keep our community spirit going.
Mayor, just a point, actually that's one of the Bill Barker Parks ideas in October is a pumpkin carving contest in that same realm down at Barker Park. So where they have a whole bunch of pumpkins, etc. That's Blake Grant's kind of grand scheme. So we'll see how that comes about, but Who knows?
Obviously, most of you aren't old enough to remember the pumpkin walk through.
No
Old
idea what you're
Town
talking
Park.
about.
Oof, getting old. Okay, what else? John?
I think
Or
that gives
council
what I
members.
was hoping for. And I really thank you, council, for the good discussion. And I know at times it felt a little tense and sensitive, but I really appreciate the commitment to just having a good discussion and
And I would invite, because I know there are some members of our community that have actually put, discussion and pressure on those running for council, commitment to no property tax increase. So if they can figure a way to do that, I surely am not smart enough to do that, but if they have ideas, we're sure willing to listen. I don't know how that would work, but I'm not the smartest guy in the city either, so any input would be appreciated. I don't think so. Okay, any public comments?
We got one more.
Oh, number 6. Oh, I'm sorry, Councilmember Watson. I didn't mean to skip over your discussion about the Cherry Days Parade. Go, take it away, Councilmember Watson.
Well, I didn't really have a whole lot to share here. I was just curious of what everyone thought. There's been some questions of whether or not the city council wants to have a float in the parade. And also if the youth city council wants to have a float in the parade. There's been a suggestion to combine those two groups into one float. So what are your thoughts on all of that? Also, to throw into the mix, there's a very old float that's sitting in one of the old Public Works garages. And it needs a lot of work. There's some that say it's hard to drive and maybe not drivable, the trailer part. So maybe it's not worth a salvaging. But are we interested in having some kind of official float, or do we want to have something just simple and very cost effective? And which of these options, I can see if the youth city council wants to put their efforts into preparing something. But knowing that we are a group of 16 or 17 kids and we have 3 weeks until that time. So we're willing to put in some work and effort there as time allows. So what are your thoughts on this idea?
Councilmember Pulver.
Something very sarcastic, but all we need is a flatbed with some chairs on it and we should be good, right? That's and then the sideline, it says frugal North Ogden, and that's what we need to say. I don't know. Sorry. I had to say that. No, but I'm definitely willing to volunteer and money and time and whatever. I think, if it's something that we can all sit on, I think that would be something awesome if we're going to be here, but especially since it's on the 4th and cross the fingers, I'd have a flyover. That's something we haven't had in 2 or 3 years. Anyway.
I think that's a high probability that's going to happen. I
So-
was talking with one of the guys that's involved with that, and he said they're just finalizing the flight pattern for the 4th, and we got our request in prior to them finalizing that. So I think there's a pretty good chance.
So,
Wow.
but anyways, we obviously did that last year and I thought that was fun and definitely would be willing to help.
I have another commitment. I committed to the fire department to go in their new vehicle. So I won't be able, but I think it would be a great thing if you could pull it off, Councilmember Watson, with the youth city council. That'd be an awesome project for them. It'd be a fun project for them. And they surely could ride on it, and then any other council members that are available. But I think that'd be a great thing for the youth city council.
could we could have one section that's the youth city council, one that's the old city council.
Well, when she talked about youth city council, that's when I made my decision. I couldn't ride on it. Councilmember Severing.
I'm supportive of the idea of the float, but I've actually really enjoyed over the years just being able to walk along and interact with the citizens. I think that's been
So
a
be in
very
the
productive
parade,
thing.
but not Ride on something, is that what you're saying?
What's that?
Be in the parade, but not ride on something, is that what you're saying? Walk alongside something?
Don't you want to wear a crown and go like this to the
I'm
commoners?
saying not even be in it at all. What are you saying?
No, I would like to be in the parade. Like I say, I thoroughly enjoyed seeing people that I
Yeah.
haven't seen in the city, you know,
I'm happy to walk too.
so
We could have-
I'm okay with that.
We could have the youth council, if they're willing to spruce up the float, they could be on the float and we could be walking around the float and be handing out candy or whatever. But not to put a damper on the spirit, I did go over to the old Public Works Center today and I was shown the float and it was looking a little shabby. And David was saying last time they put, it was like it was like tens of thousands of dollars to get it up to snuff. So I don't know if I just don't want to just make sure they're up to it if they want to do it. And I
Christina?
don't know but it looked pretty good, but there would definitely have to be some attention to it.
And I have a 16-foot trailer they could use to decorate if they wanted. They're more than welcome to use that. It'd handle all them. I think it handles up to 5,000 pounds or something. So they're more than welcome to use that and decorate it up if they'd like. Just let me know. So, okay, how about you, Councilmember Barker?
I'm in the same commitment that you are. We have a new fire chief and he really wants all of admin in the same vehicle this year. So
Whatever.
Come on, really?
Where's your loyalty, man?
I don't,
I don't answer
money.
Don't answer that.
Pay you more money.
Yep.
this is, so it's gonna be
It's his
gonna
job
be
or
4 of the council people
Mhm.
because our mayor and another councilman. has to sit
Abandon
on a
us.
truck.
Correct.
I think the 4 of us could represent. John, you want to be on it? So just another question.
2 of them.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, I'm just being sarcastic. Just every parade has to have a party pooper and we've got 2 of them.
So the money that we get from RAMP is somewhat available for this, or?
So for, one of the thoughts was, because the North Pole and Trunk or Treat got enough from sponsors, we didn't actually spend some of our ramp municipalities grant money on those events. And so we thought we could use a little bit of that money to do the decorations as opposed to taking it for someplace else if the council was agreeable to that. Thinking, I don't know, maybe $1,500 or something. If we're gonna decorate your trailer, for example, Mayor, if it was the city trailer, it would be more because it's a longer term thing, but it probably wouldn't even be $1,500. It'd be less than that.
I have no idea what it costs.
Okay,
I'm
well,
okay with that. If you're gonna spruce up the float for $1,000-$1,500 or something out of those ramp funds that we get.
And I'm-
see, Councilmember Severing has joined the group of saying I'm non-patriotic, so.
I know you're patriotic.
So-
You know, first come, first serve, I had to make a commitment.
Yeah, but your first service was being a mayor, not being on the fire.
Oh,
being
wow.
on the fire.
Hey, understand,
Get in the helmet.
it's really important that we have fire protection in the
I
city.
think there's a priority there and I
You
don't
know?
know, I think you skipped it.
Yeah, well, you know me,
Hey,
you know me. What else, John?
I think that'll cover us. I think that gives us enough room that we can make sure there's something ready. And then we do typically buy the council candy to hand out, and we have wagons you can drag and things like that.
It's separate from the 1,500.
Yeah, usually that's just part of our Cherry Days budget.
And I'm more than happy, if the fire department is like way up front, I'll get off and come back or vice versa. I'm more than happy to go back and forth. So,
The only thing I think the parade asks is that the council keep up with the float in front of them. Because that has happened, especially on election years, where they slow down.
okay, well, so be it. Okay. Public comments. Are we okay to now move to public comments? Let's see. Do we have anybody online, John? Before Brenda comes up? Who wants to speak? Don't see any hands raised. Go ahead, Brenda.
Brenda Ashdown. I live in North Ogden. Have a whole list for you. I'll try to keep it to the 5 minutes. I just want to give my 2 cents about what you guys talked about tonight. When I was on the first Citizen Budget Committee, one of our recommendations was that you do a yearly tax increase. Inflation goes up every year. We all expect that. None of us like it. Granted, it's true, but everything is going to cost more. And if you do a little bit every year instead of 10%, 20%, it in the long run makes it easier, pardon me, for us. I sit between all of these people that you're talking about. I'm a senior citizen on a fixed income. I'm raising a grandchild that does recreation programs, okay? I have the same feeling about the recreation programs. Raise them $2 or $3 every year, because I know everything I'm going to do is going to cost me a little bit more. I resent it the most when I go to pay this year and it's $40 and I go to pay next year and it's $60. That's when it becomes really, really difficult on the budget. We need to be competitive, 100%. Be competitive with the cities around us. I totally agree with that. But again, I just don't make it huge. When people come with ideas to the city council for the city to support something, please be very, very conservative. I think that's part of what's going to get into trouble as far as the budget is concerned, because there are good activities out there, the pumpkin patch, Chalk It Up, and all of those little things. Maybe it's only 1,000, maybe it's only 5,000, but it adds up. And you do so many this year, you do that next year and add so many more and add so many more. Pretty soon you're putting out a lot of money. And that's where some of my question comes from, on wanting to know what the city sponsors, what their partnerships with, how much money. And what I found very interesting with the last meeting was the partnerships that I had no idea was part of the city, like sharing the parking lot up at McGriff with the church, different things like that. I would like that to be a little more open. I would like some more information on that and what the partnerships are. Maybe if for no other reason than I see this partnership with my city that I like, I will support that partnership or that business or whatever is, because they are working with my city. But I would like to see that be a little more transparent. Senior Center. Here again, I'm on both ends. I think the Senior Center is a great thing. I haven't personally used it much. My mother did when she was alive and she lived where I live. She used the Senior Center. She went over there for dinners. They used to have a quilting. She made me a quilt because my grandma used to make them. She passed, so my mom went to the Senior Center and had help making this quilt. She used it a lot. I think it's a great thing. I also don't think that it's hurtful to charge a little bit if they're going to eat lunch there and they pay. I may be totally speaking out of mind because I don't know what they do now, but if they charge $2 or $3 for that meal, senior citizen is going to pay $2 or $3 or $4 for a meal that they're going to have to pay a whole lot more than that if they fix it on their own. And they're getting a decent meal. They're getting companionship of other people. The only biggest problem I have with the Senior Center is the overall major cost. And why is it necessary that our city has to cover all of that? My recommendation, and I don't know how you do it, and I would never want to sit in your shoes, so I just give my opinion. Somehow we need to get a commitment from, if Huntsville, Eden, Liberty, if they're going to come to our Senior Center, Plain City, Far West, all of those places, if we're the only senior center that's going to be here in this end of town, then all of those cities need to be contributing so that it's not totally $100,000 from North Ogden. If there was any way to be able to hold them to it, like Pleasant View does, contributes, if we could do that, that would be great. Otherwise, I'm sorry to say, if that cannot be community run, that's a lot of money that the city's got to come up with. And I think there's got to be another way that that can happen. That's I don't know, make it a little more like recreation, I guess, and charge a little bit or something. I don't know. That's my opinion. Thank you.
Thank you.
It's something for those windows.
Sandy Cochran, North Ogden. I agree with Brenda on the budget. I'm also a senior citizen on basically a fixed income. I expect property taxes to go up. The price of everything goes up. And like Brenda, I don't want 30% one year. If it's consistently a certain amount every year, I can live with it. The other thing I had was a question about the ramp money you want to use to fix the float. I remembered the city council last year during the parade. And John, I want you to let me know if the council is allowed to purchase guns with that money. I know last year, I think every single one of you had a water gun.
It was actually that big
It was
tank
Hoses.
hoses.
Phil Swanson had donated his money to rent.
Oh, is that where
tank.
that came? So
And I'm-
Phil's not on the council.
Yeah.
Does that mean none of you are going to be wedding us this year? Get a guarantee of that or
I
what?
tried to get money out of Councilmember Watson, but she wouldn't come up with it.
I won't spray you.
Okay, that's all I've got. Thanks.
Okay, looks like we have a hand raised online, John.
Yep, Susan, there we go.
Hi, Susan Kilborn, and I hate to admit it, but senior citizen resident of North Ogden. I really appreciate that you guys had what was probably a tough decision for you all to make, and you're all coming together and you're all going to walk out of there tonight. You've all been laughing, and I think that's awesome. To Christina, who has volunteered to do some polishing up or whatever with the senior center. I sent you a message, Christina, but I'll tell you here publicly, I would be happy to work with you on any ideas with the senior center. And also, while I don't use it a lot, I have used it. My parents, I took them there a lot when they were still alive. And there are a lot of seniors I know that are willing, and I know I have in the past, give more than what's required. And I think the council needs to think about in general, there are a lot of us out here that if we're just asked to help do something, you've got a whole city of people out here with all varied talents. And if you start utilizing them, you not only have input from the citizens you're representing, but you're also getting good ideas, diversity, things like that. And also, I echo what Sandy said. And if you guys douse me with water again, I'm telling you, I'm bringing my Nerf power water pistol because you really got us good.
Who did?
You and Phil and Blake.
Never.
I was careful.
Anyway, that's all I have. I appreciate
Thank you.
guys. And please consider the citizens as people to go to for help. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Stella Richards, North Ogden. Thank you, council. Appreciate the comments and the time you spent in our behalf. Our seniors are very important to me, such as with recreation and all that. And we all, like to be together, and seniors are a different bunch. They're coming to different situations in their lives, and they need the center. They need people to be around them. since the COVID, they've had a real hard time. They are starting to kind of ease into it now and do a little better. And their socialization and the situation with each other is improving. And I just want to thank you guys for considering us. And I know everybody needs the help, but I appreciate you thinking of the seniors because they're at an age where they can't always go get a job and kind of supplement some of their income and stuff like that. So they're just needing to have companionship and a nice meal. And so anyway, thank you so much. Appreciate your time and keep us in mind.
Thank you, Zella. I don't think there's anyone left to make a comment. So we'll proceed now then to item number 8. Are there any other comments, council or staff? Joyce?
Just a quick one on that Bill Barker Park's doing another cleanup this Saturday from 8 to 11. So it's still going strong. So Bill Barker Park, they're cleaning up trails over behind the amphitheater.
Why is there nothing on the city Facebook, on the calendar?
Don't know. It's a good question. Yep.
So I'm sure we could work on that, I bet. It was the 501c3 to put it together, and I don't think it was discussed in our last Barker Park City Committee. So John, I'm sure you're open to helping get that on social media
Yeah,
and maybe the website.
Yeah, and we have been trying to keep it separate. I mean, there is a website that we built, and so that's one of the reasons. But I don't know what the linkage is,
And
or if
maybe
we can or
and
cannot.
maybe just to because there has been a lot of confusion about what is the
Yeah.
501c3 and what is the city committee. If you do put anything on social media, John or whoever's going to handle that, just put a little disclaimer that says this is a 501c3 that's organizing this or something.
And what we've done in the past, because they're a partner, that we will just share their post, and that helps make it so that
Yes.
people who
Okay.
are interested can then follow their Facebook page, and it helps quite a bit. Yeah.
And I did see a calendar of events for the remainder of the year came out, John. So we should be able to get that on the city calendar because they've planned things out for the rest of the year. So, okay, any other comments? I think Councilmember Severing, you.
Yeah, it was just two things. The first one is skate park. Where are we at on the skate park, John? Has there been any?
So we've had, like, staff has been talking about different ideas with the police and others. We were planning on bringing it to the council as kind of a, hey, here's what we'd like to do. This may sound a little funny, but I think initially we'd like to come with, hey, here's some ideas on ways to try and deter kids from doing what they're doing. Talking about fencing and cameras. Because what we do have a lot of folks who like to use it, who, as long as there's not the big bullies there, it seems to be working out. But we have also considered if we did tear out some of the major components and, essentially throw away some money, then we might drive some of those kids off because they're there for some of those nicer features, and we would just be left with the parents with their kids. But anything we do, we want to do very slowly, because if kids show up to skate and it's closed or it's gone, then we would anticipate a significant amount of vandalism. Those park bathrooms have been closed since the last day of school, when all of the lids in the restrooms were taken off and smashed by somebody at between 9 and 10 in the morning. So our folks went and opened the bathrooms, checked them, and went to get a part for something, came back, and all the lids have been smashed. So there's, then that was the last day of school. That was that Friday when kids were doing yearbook signing and stuff. And anyway, so they're still closed. We have a porta potty up there. And then on the Children's Entrepreneur Market, which is Thursday, we're having extra porta potties brought up because we won't be able to get them open in time. So.
Okay.
There was
Yeah.
a second thing.
Mhm.
I'm just kind of curious, Sandy and Brenda. You ask questions of us. Can I ask a question of them?
Yeah, we're in a work session.
My grandson needs My husband has to go and sit with him because of these guys, but then the money that was spent to change it, and then it gets shut down. I don't know what you do. But, you know, it takes a few stupid teenagers to ruin it for everybody else.
Right. That wasn't the question I was going to ask you, but I appreciate that insight. I was just kind of curious, and I appreciated both of your comments about, you know, we kind of expect an increase in property taxes every year, right? So knowing that we would like not only to be at a point where we're maintaining, which we've kind of talked about being around, I have to be very careful in saying this, but you know, maybe around 3%. What is a fair, what would from the citizenry, what would be a fair increase every year, knowing that we've got a lot to catch up on? Is 10% too high?
You know, that's where I feel sorry for you guys, because I think that because of how you're looking at things now has not been done for the last 30 years. You guys are in a hard spot. It's like the sidewalks and the roads that have to be fixed. Somehow you've got to come up with that money. I think a fair for taxes, I think we recommended in the budget committee was a 3 to 5% every year.
So 3% hopefully to maintain, 2% to hopefully get ahead.
If it did anything, if the 2% was enough to do anything.
Okay.
And it's understandable that it's going to have to be more, but I think I personally could deal with 5%. Some people will not. We all know some people that came here with the last time and lost their mind because there was a proposed increase. So some don't want anything at all. I would much rather see a little bit on all of it, which I know when it all adds up, it ends up being the same. But I'd rather see a little bit all across every year than, man, I gotta come up with $100 more. Those are the things that kill.
Sandy?
And I'm okay with 10%. But I would ask you all, because I listen to a lot of my neighbors, and every year, North Ogden raised my taxes $280, and I'm like, no, they didn't. Look at your bill.
Yeah.
I want every one of you for weeks to point out that the North Ogden portion of the bill is not the entire bill, because they're having a fit over something that's not accurate. And I'll spend forever sitting and explaining to one person, and then it's like, oh, okay. And then the next year, I'll be walking my dog and somebody else will say, the next time you go to city council, tell them, and I will spend an hour explaining to that. So I expect you all to say, you know, when we raise it this much %, it's from this line on your bill. And because I think they need to know that. I think they get their bill, and last year it was 2,300. This year it's 26, and you're going to get blamed if you don't defend yourself.
Right. So between the two of you, you're saying between 5 to 10%.
I would
3 to
be-
10%.
3 to
I
10%.
would be okay with between 5 and 10%. I would.
Okay. Zella, you're sitting out there. Do you want to say something? As long as I don't want you to feel excluded. Okay. All right.
Yeah, just to put that into perspective, 5% increase would equate to $1.56 a month on average. Some would be more, some would be less, but on the average, it's about $1.56 a month at 5%.
So for 10% would be $3.
Good math.
I just, you
Yeah.
know,
That's
but
really
I
good
don't say that
math.
because I'm not trying to
Did
like
you do that in your
amaze you.
head?
I'm just saying, hey,
Oh, that was
10%,
amazing.
that's
That was
really not-
amazing, Blake.
To go to 10% really doesn't make that big of a difference, but it would sure make a difference in what we could do in the future. That's why I was kind of,
Roads and sidewalks. Speaking of sidewalks, that one in front of Village of Prominence Point, again, the weeds are growing from both sides of the sidewalk like this. Sorry, that was my chance. I had to take it.
All right.
well, thank you.
Okay.
Thanks for your positive
Yeah.
feedback to your friends too.
Yeah, I think that is the point because, you know, the major raises dollar wise come out of other entities in the county. But once again, it's still how much is coming out of their pocket. It might be $1.56 for us, then it might be $10 a month for everyone else. But I think communication and improving that. But it would be nice if we were the only one raising taxes, right? And they only increased $1.56 or $3.12 or whatever it is. So what else? What other comments? John, do you have anything?
Just, again, wanted to thank everyone for having a good, robust discussion. They're not always fun and easy. And I do think that if anyone, you know, if there was any sharpness or anything felt, I don't think anyone intended it. So just one of the best experiences I've had with councils was one that used to be, they were really aggressive with each other, but they left it at the door when they left the room, and the next time they came back fresh. And so if you did, you know, if you feel offended, sorry. I hope I didn't say anything, but I know if anyone did, then I'm sure they're sorry as well. And you probably none of you do. I'm a middle child and I like happiness. So
So was that a blanket apology on behalf of everyone, John? Thank you.
I just
Thank
don't
you.
want anyone running away frustrated, because it was a good discussion and a healthy one.
Don't
for
go
the group.
soft on
I
us, John.
didn't feel any tension.
Okay.
I think it was a good discussion. I think everyone is fine, but thanks for your thoughts there, Mr. Call. All right, then I would be looking for a motion to adjourn the meeting.
Motion to adjourn.
Okay, meeting is adjourned.